Welcome, and thank you so much for letting me talk about self-care, which is one of my favorite topics, especially for people who do innovation, because they tend to neglect that part at times. So, and it's also something that I really think that every child should learn. I mean, to some extent, some of the things that we're talking about today might seem stupidly obvious to you. Awesome if they do, but they are actually kind of obvious when you pay attention, but a lot of us don't, right? And we've never been taught to do this. We didn't learn this in school. And so I think that's super unfortunate. I was kind of fortunate in the sense that I was one of those like hyperactive kids. You know, and there's actually a word in German called Zappel-Philipp, which means like fidgety Philip. You know, so I was this little fidgety Philip, and this was before the pharmaceutical industry discovered that they could have lifetime customers by turning kids into speed junkies. And pardon the dig if you are in the pharmaceutical industry, you know, but fortunately my dad instead looked at me one day and said, dude, you need to learn how to chill. And he gave me a bunch of yoga and meditation books and said, here, learn this. And so I started learning yoga and meditation, and I got into esoterics and occult stuff, and studied with gurus in India and shamans in South America, and drank strange brews and hang out with Californian shamans and transformational psychologists, neurologists, really looking, what does it mean to be human and how do we best operate and function? And I want to start today and talk a little bit about that, but actually start with a bit of a practical piece. And if you guys were in Sonia's session this morning, you've done some grounding already. Awesome, you're doing it for the second time today. If it's out of 365 days, one day you do it twice, I'm sure that's okay. So very simple one. And again, it's like for me, when people talk about meditation, you know, they make it out to be this big, huge thing, an esoteric thing or whatever. For me, honestly, and pardon my language, I call it my fuck all you all time. Right? This is really when you can tell everybody else to go away, everybody, every boss, every problem, every email, every colleague, every family member. This is your time, right? So I want to invite you to take a moment of your time and start by simply looking around the room. Look around what you see. I see a door, name the things in your head. Right? I see CDs, I see a table, I see a chair, I see a light. Just look around the room and name the things. And you'll see there's nothing that you need to pay attention to right now. And you can allow yourself to relax and maybe even close your eyes or put them in soft focus, whatever is comfortable for you. And there's nothing to see right now that you need to pay attention to. If there's nothing to see and we go away from that, we hear much more. Right? And you hear the sound of my voice. You might hear some of the traffic in the background. There might even be some siren coming by. I live in a busy street. But there's nothing that you need to pay attention to right now. No alarm, no sounds that you actually need to worry about. You can allow yourself to relax and more. And take a deep breath in and out. And notice what you're smelling. You might be smelling yourself. You might be having some coffee in front of you, maybe some food, maybe just your computer or the stuff around you. But again, no smoke, nothing that you need to pay attention to right now. And you can allow yourself to relax even more. Take a moment to taste what's in your mouth. And maybe coffee, food or something, maybe toothpaste if you just got up. But again, nothing that you need to spit out, no poison, nothing that you need to worry about. You can allow yourself to relax. And as you do that, take a moment and find your feet on the ground. Kind of move them forward and backwards, slightly, sideways. Find all four corners of each foot solidly planted on the ground and supported. And go up from your feet to your ankles, your shins and calves, and knees and thighs, and your hips and your butt solidly planted in the chair, supported. Your back, your torso, all supported. Your arms and legs, arms and hands relaxed. And your neck and shoulders, we hold a lot of tension there. And if you notice tension, simply notice it. Don't worry about it. Keep going up to your head and your face. Allow it to relax. And as you're in your whole body, take a moment to notice what happened today. From when you got up to now, how you've been sitting, standing, moving around with it. Being fully in your body all day long, whether you notice it or not. And all the different emotions that you've had already today, good, bad, right? How you woke up, maybe it was something that got triggered. Maybe beautiful talks you heard, like this morning's talk by Sonia, moved you. all kinds of emotions. It all happened. All kinds of thoughts that triggered those emotions. Good thoughts, bad thoughts, whatever. Different kinds of thoughts. Some were supportive of you. You doubted yourself and put yourself down a bit too already today. But all that happened. It's not happening right now. All the different people and relationships, all that happened. In your own voice, maybe you used it, maybe you held back from saying things you really wanted to say or express. And all the different things you already imagined today about the future, or what could be. Maybe you're worried about some things, about a meeting that's coming up, about a project that you're working on. But it's not happening right now. And all the things that happened in the last year even. You might have felt sick, you might have felt hurt and pain, might have felt great at times when you exercised, might have felt bad when you looked in the mirror, might have felt good when you looked in the mirror. All kinds of things happen with your body. And all kinds of emotions, lots of fear and anxiety, or stress. But again, nothing right now. All the thoughts, all the relationships, all that stuff happened. You can let it go. And think about those best moments last year. When you felt fully in your body, when you tasted something good, when you made love with yourself or with someone and it just felt really awesome, or when you exercised and you felt really great. Right? And generally when you felt really great, when you felt safe for a moment. You had those moments, right? When your thoughts were actually supporting you and affirming who you are and who you want to be. And your relationships were supportive of that. And you were expressing yourself, you're saying things that you really wanted to say. And you envisioned a future that you would want to live in. And you felt like it could create. What also happened. In that sense, connecting to that energy of who you can be, who you could become, slowly come back into the room and open your eyes. And we'll keep going. I really like groundings, especially, throughout the day and doing shorter ones. People talk about meditation and, it's hard to meditate for an hour, but even like taking 5 minutes throughout the day can really help you reset some. And especially as innovators, that's super important. So why innovators? Take a step back out. If I look at how we work on this planet, how we live on this planet, how we are being human with each other, ultimately we have this sort of cultural operating system, right? We might have different regional differences, but subcultures, all that. But overall, we have a way of operating here. Okay? And for the most part, that was created by artists, right? In the widest sense, storytellers, people who come up with new visions of what the future could hold. Right? And you have entrepreneurs who are prototyping that, building new solutions, right? And entrepreneurs who are doing that inside of organizations and scaling these new ideas into larger audiences. Right? Then you have the activists that are making sure that they don't go overboard, right? NGOs, politics, and making sure that that doesn't go crazy. And then you have sort of educators who inform the next generation of what it means to be a human. Right? And what they all have in common is that they all go outside the existing cultural operating system. Right? When you're inside, you're just doing what people do already anyway. Right? But these people go outside. And they're trying to stretch it and see, how can we build a world that works for more people? Right? And they're trying to stretch the system. And if they're lucky, they actually manage to bring back stuff that dissolves the existing operating system. But most of the time they get no. Right? And forgive me for yelling at you, but I wanted to make the point that even if you get no, right, your whole body cringes, right? Just because some stranger says no to you, but like even yelling, right, is stressful. Right? And there's actually a bigger picture. But if you take bacterial cultures and the external bacteria go out and explore the environment to see what else is out there, and they come back and say, hey guys, we found these receptors. If the colony signals back, we don't need this, the cell actually kills itself. Right? There's suicide on a cellular level. Right? So when you're an innovator, you're trying to bring all this new stuff to your company, these new ideas, and you're getting no, 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 no. Eventually you don't even want to be here anymore. Right? And think about what that does for your mental health. And for your confidence. Because confidence in Latin, right, confidere means to have faith with. Right? And what do you have in faith with? If you have in faith with external things in a normal cultural operating system, right, your house, your job title, your salary, your bank account, all these things, great. But as an innovator, if you're doing new things, you might not get that. right? You might not get that positive feedback, and it erodes your confidence. And if I want to create the future, right, I have to also actually become present first. And for that, I have to let go of the past. And really, the past requires I have to accept and forgive. Whatever has happened has happened. Right? Last year happened. It's done. Right? And I have to find myself here, right now, in this present time, and anchor myself, right? And really find that stillness in between what was and what's about to be, right? Hence the grounding. Right? And this anchoring in the present is very important. Like every magician I know, every artist, every guru, every shaman, the first thing they do is to find the four directions, right? So I do the four directions and above and below and find themselves and say, here's where I'm at right now. And then you can aspire to the future, right? And anticipate who you could become. And it's important to understand that we're not here to judge ourselves against that. Right? We're here to learn from the past, but that's it. We're not here to judge ourselves for who we've been. All life innocently explores purpose, and you've been doing that. Everybody's been doing that. Let's really get to let go of that. And we need to make sure that we don't confuse aspiring to a future self with judging ourselves against it. Right? I have a vision of myself, of who I could become. If I judge myself against it, I'd suck donkey balls right now. I'd be horrible. Right? But if I have it as an aspiration, then I have something to grow towards. Right? And I think that's really important to make that distinction, that we don't judge ourselves for who we are not yet, right? But instead embrace that as our continuous practice. And so if I think about who I need to be, right, if I'm going to create certain outcomes, I have to have certain behaviors. If I want to have certain behaviors, I have to have a certain mindset. Right? And a lot of psychology, a lot of innovation talks all the way up to behavior. And they rarely talk about mindset. Right? But if I have a certain mindset and certain behaviors are not even available to me, so I need to really start there. And understand that that's a process too, right? Where I'm constantly becoming aware of new things, and then I have the opportunity to take responsibility for them. And if I do that, I'm in ownership of my life, right? That's that sweet zone. And if I can become aware of things, but I'm not actually taking responsibility for them, I'm playing small, right? I'm pushing things down. I'm depressing myself, right? I mean, there's this reason there's depression rising in our society because we are aware that things is not working, right? That our spaceship is on fire, that we need a whole lot of new solutions fast because we can't just step outside. Right? We're aware of it, but we're pushing it down. We're not necessarily always taking responsibility for it yet, right? And that's leading to depression. On the other hand, there's a lot of people that have taken on new responsibility, more, especially last year, right? Suddenly all these new things that needed to be done, right? Taking all this responsibility. But if you don't increase your awareness, and if you don't change who you are and your mindset, that'll lead to burning out eventually. Right? So you always want to be in this tension field between your old self and your aspirational self, right? And always have that next thing, but know that you're here where you're at right now, and it's perfect. And it's a process, right? Buckminster Fuller said, I seem to be a verb. Right? We have this noun thinking where it's like, oh, this is Philip. Philip is this, right? I am a color, I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm a job title, right? I'm not that, I'm a moving process, right? I'm constantly changing. I've changed at least 3 times since breakfast. And change happens all the time, even outside of us, right? There's 2020, and as Captain Kirk said, shit just got real, right? It was a whole different year, right? We suddenly, all these blinders went off and we saw what's going on in the world. We saw how polluted our cities were because we suddenly saw that it was not so anymore. We saw each other as humans suddenly for the first time at home, all kinds of things. We saw the incongruence around essential people and the role of women. All these things became transparent last year. And I used to use this expression of VUCA for years, and people are always like, what's that mean? Now it's becoming a household name, right? Living in La Vida VUCA is now normal, right? Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity are not longer just for the few, right? And I have little soldiers here because this used to be a military term, right? They came up with military because they said, hey, there's these situations where it's different from normal, and we need some special forces, right? And I have the SEALs here, right? And one of my favorite sayings from the SEALs, a friend of mine taught me that. It was a SEAL trainer. He said, slow is smooth, smooth is fast, right? So there's these people who are going out and it's like short, small teams who have to really coherently work together. There's a great book out there called Stealing Fire, which actually talks about some of the research that the Navy SEALs have done in the last 30 years on trying to figure out how to create high-performance, congruent teams. And they have a lot of stress, obviously, right? They're in combat zones, they're out there. I mean, we think of stress as usually negative, but stress is also an important thing. Right? Stress is actually what gets us up in the morning. That first shot of cortisol that we all get in the morning, that gets us out of bed. Right? Or when you have a deadline that you need to work towards, right? Or when your child is running across the street and there's a truck coming, you're going to have some stress in that moment, right? And as soon as you encounter something new, you have stress, right? When you're learning something new, you have stress. Every social situation causes stress. Right? People talk about social anxiety, but we all have that. Well, it's just seeing another thing, actually that's symmetrical, already causes stress. Right? Just perceiving symmetry triggers our amygdala, which I'll talk about in a moment. So if we go back and understand stress, we have to really look at systems. Right? In systems, if I think about it, there's an in, something goes on, something comes out. Right? And pretty much everything can be looked at as a system. System theory comes from biology originally. When as a human, I'm a point of perception, I take things in, right? I'm a point of processing, there's stuff going on here, and there's stuff coming out, right? I'm producing things, and hopefully, good stuff. And with stress, there's a stressor, right? And unless you live on some mountain somewhere remote from everybody else, and probably even there's going to be stressors. There's going to be noises, there's going to be emails from colleagues that piss you off, there's going to be all kinds of stuff that are going to be stressful, right? But then there's an interpretation of that stressor. And then there's your stress response or reaction, depending on how conscious you are actually interpreting that signal. But it's interpretation that's important, right? Because just because something is a stressor doesn't mean you have to be stressed. Right? Depending on how you interpret it, the exact same thing can actually be funny. Right? It's just a matter of interpretation. And it's important to remember that emotions are important signals, right? Emotion, it even says that it moves us, right? Actually, in the end, we do everything out of emotion. We might think we're rational, but before we move our body, there's emotion, right? That puts it in motion, but it's not how you feel. Like, for example, if someone crosses your boundary, right? The natural response of that is anger, right? Somebody just crossed your boundary. It's an absolutely appropriate response to be angry for a moment, to feel anger as an emotion coming in, right? But then there's a big difference if you throw something across the room, or if you say, wow, that made me really angry. I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to go for a little walk or run a little bit, or I'm going to do something. Take a deep breath, and then I'm going to respond to that email and say, hey, buddy, when you send me that email, really crossed my boundary here. Can we talk about this? All right? Instead of writing something back that's super pissy and might destroy the relationship. Right? So it's important to understand that emotions are important. They're all valid. Every single emotion you have is valid. How you interpret an emotion, how you interact with that emotion is what makes a difference. And it's really coming back to that limbic system. I kind of briefly talked about that earlier. But like when something comes in, right, that's stressful, what gets activated is your amygdala. Right? There's this little part in your brain, the amygdala, and its job is to constantly look at the environment for potential threats and dangers. Right? And as I said, even symmetry triggers it. Right? As soon as you see something symmetrical, because in nature back in the day, the only things that were symmetrical were food, foe, or friend. It's called friend, right? Something to pair with, right? But apple, right? Saber-toothed tiger, or potential mate, right? Those are the only things symmetrical. And so amygdala reacts to that. And as soon as it does, the sympathetic system kicks in, and 1,400 chemicals are released into your body, causing what we know as sort of as a fight or flight response. Right? And it's actually, blood in arms and legs, so you can run or fight, right? You're expanding pupils, so you can make sure you see everything. Your bronchi are dilated, your heart rate increases, everything else stops inside, right? Because you're focused on the outside here. Right? Until you relax and you go, oh, not a danger after all. Right? And then your parasympathetic nervous system kicks in, 1,200 different chemicals go into your system, right? And the blood becomes evenly distributed throughout your body. Your contracted pupils don't take in as much light because you don't need to see everything right now, right? You have increased saliva production because you're like, I'm feeling good right now. Maybe I should eat something, right? And you actually have a slowed down heart rate, and your whole system, right? Your digestion, your pancreas, your gallbladder, they all start functioning really well. And you even become kind of interested in procreation because you're kind of feeling good, and you're like, oh, who else is out there? What else could I do, right? And the problem is, they're usually both there, and they both have their place. As I said, there's good stress, bad stress. And the problem is chronic stress, right? And we always activate our sympathetic nervous system, and we don't do enough of this. Right? And there's irritability and nervousness. That's the starting point, right? Chronic fatigue, headaches and migraine issues, concentrating, unorganized thinking, sleeping disorders, digestive issues, eating disorders, helplessness and loss of control, lack of confidence, sexual dysfunctions, right? Weakened immune system. All those things come when we're stressed, when we're chronically stressed. Actually, Harvard Medical Review a few years ago suggested that 70% of all doctors' visits are actually directly related to stress. This is what chronic stress does to us. It makes us sick. If you look at those stats, they're not looking good. It's actually been increasing in the modern day. And so what can you do about it? And I'm going to essentially talk about acutely and preventatively things you can do. And acutely, the first thing you can do is take a deep breath. Right? Because if you take a deep breath, that actually activates your parasympathetic nervous system. You don't have to be a little yogi girl. SEALs do that too, right? They actually have a really great, awesome exercise called 4-blocker. Right? And it's very simple. We're going to do it together in a moment and explain it first. It's very simple. It's based on the idea that you inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and hold for 4. I invite you to do that with me. We're going to do it 4 times. Right? So go ahead. Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. One more time. Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Take a moment and notice how your brain's feeling right now if you did that exercise just now. Can you feel that little, right? That's oxygen coming into your brain, which makes for good thinking, right? So simple thing you can do, breathe. Right? And the other thing you can do, which we actually did at the beginning, you already did that today, which is check in with your 5 senses. Right? Take a look around the room. When something stresses you, take a look around the room. What do you see? I see a table, I see a chair, I see a lamp. Right? No saber-toothed tiger. Right? Hear, smell, taste, same thing, right? Check in with your different senses and see what's really happening, right? Bringing yourself into the present moment. So that you can say, I'm right here, right now. This is what I'm experiencing, actually experiencing, not imagining. The other thing you can do is power position. Right? Standing like this, or even standing like this, a Wonder Woman thing here, right? Akimbo. Standing like this for a couple minutes increases testosterone and reduces cortisol, your stress hormone. Right? So just by standing like this, you actually get less stress and you feel more powerful. When I do that before I go on talks or before I go into an important meeting, I just stand there for a while and just like, la, 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 let that thing do its thing. And the testosterone comes in. It's like, oh, I feel good. Right? And the cortisol goes away and you don't feel so stressed. So what can you do preventatively, long term? Because I mean, this is really what we talked about. How can you use a human operating system, for resilience? And I like this map of, people that have seen chakras before might be like, oh, chakras, right? But it's a map, right? And as Count Korzybski said, the map is never the territory. It's a really damn good map I found in the 45 years that I studied esoterics, because it's 7 things and we tend to be able to remember 7 things. And it also actually corresponds with Pythagoras' teachings about the octaves. It teaches, with the Kabbalah, it goes with Tantra, with Hinduism, with some shamanism stuff. Pretty much around the world, we have kind of the similar systems in the end. They might have different names and different stories attached to them, but they all talk about really basic things, right? We talk about the fact that we have a body, which you can sense, right? Those 5 senses we talked about. And we have emotions, right? We have feelings. We have that sense that's also coming in where we can have intuition, so we can like things, not like things. There's also some information coming from it. And of course, we can have a mind, we can think, right? And thanks to the age of enlightenment, that's where we think we're at, right? I think, therefore I am, right? But we also have relationships, right? We have agreements with people, we have commitments around them, we make choices in the connection that we have with reality. Because all actually experience requires separation, right? And also, because I have to actually have some separation to experience something, right? And when I experience reality, right, all of reality, Latin is alles, means other things. So there's this relationships with reality that I have. And I have a voice, right? A unique voice, not just the voice I'm speaking with, but every one of us is unique. Nobody's ever been like you, right? You have unique gifts and talents, unique experiences, unique insights, unique everything. Nobody's ever been you before, right? So there's a unique, important voice that you have to bring to the table. And of course, the capacity to express, right? And you have the capacity for vision, right? Where you can imagine things. Right? And we all have that sense of a calling where we feel like we're meant to create something here, right? Because if you look at life, all life produces more value than it consumes. Right? If a tree said, I just want to focus on growing and taking stuff in for a moment, I'm going to stop growing fruit, wouldn't work, right? It wouldn't grow. And corresponding to that, in terms of our existential and creative self, as I said earlier, we focus on this mind layer so much, right? And especially when employees go to work, right? We think we're all about thinking. We're not supposed to feel things, let alone check in with our body, or this other stuff is some weird esoteric stuff anyway, but we're here to be rational. And then we hide everything else, right? 70% of employees hide and cover who they are when they go to work every day. That means you're not bringing all these other pieces of yourself to the table. That's horrible, right? If you had such a return on investment on any other asset, you would throw it out. Right? And this is what we do to humans. Right? We take this little tiny layer and say, you can think, right? And then people pretend that they're thinking, but they're really feeling and just putting nice words around it. And all the dysfunction that's happening in the other areas is coming out in inappropriate ways. All the needs that aren't met. Right? We have these needs that correspond with this, right? We have survival needs, we need to eat, sleep, drink, all these things. Right? We have safety needs, we want to feel good, we want to feel connected. We have self-esteem needs, we want to feel like we matter and what we say is important. We have social needs, we want to be connected to people. Right? And some of you might discover there's Maslow, of course, in here, but then also talked about self-actualization. Right? And so we also have this other thing, we want to be ourselves, we want to have an autonomous life, we want to be something special. Right? And then later on, he actually added, that's a bit of an ego show here, right? This is a temporary stage until you transcend yourself, right? Until you go into what's the bigger picture that I'm serving for my work. And then ultimately going to calling, right? We have that sense of the need for meaning, for purpose in our life. And so in terms of preventing and becoming more resilient and adaptive, what you want to do is create rituals for activation around these different interfaces. The first one, of course, is your body. Right? And garbage in, garbage out, right? Talk about systems theory. Anybody that knows that, if you eat crap food all day long and you don't move your body, it's not just bad crap that's coming out, right? It's like the result's going to be crap. Right? And I don't think that there's a right diet, right? I think there's only one right diet, and that's yours. Right? Everybody is different. Everybody has different physical conditioning, even a different microbiome. So whatever might be right for one person is not necessarily right for the other person. Like I tried, for example, raw vegan food a few years ago, and I was so hyperactive afterwards. I could not actually deal with reality. I had to stop and I had to go introduce some fats and some animal products back into my diet because that was just too much. But that's me. For you, it might be the perfect thing, but that's your job is to find out. In general, though, of course, the less processed, the more natural the food, the better. Right? And also, if you wake up in the morning and the first thing you have is protein, right, your body has some substance to work with. If the first thing I eat in the morning is some white flour and sugar, which white flour is sugar too, right, a bunch of candy, I get up for a moment, but then at like 10 o'clock I'm this. And then we get up and eat some more, and I go back down. And all day long you're doing this, right? You're constantly managing your sugar crash, right, or caffeine crash. So be aware of what you put in your system. And of course, what you put in your system, please put in water. Right? We're all terribly dehydrated for the most part, right? But our whole body is made of water. Right? Actually, even being short of one glass of water already inhibits your peripheral vision, and not just physical vision, but also vision here, right? And affects your mood measurably, right? And also your short-term memory. Right? So as innovators, we always make sure we have cases of water in the room, and we encourage people to drink water. I just do it every hour. I either eat something or drink a big glass of water. Very simple way. So this way, every hour, a little snack, healthy snack, hopefully, and some water. But put hydration in your system, please. Exercise is another one, right? When you exercise, you're creating endorphins, you're creating all kinds of good hormones in your systems that are helping you grow and move, also making you more resilient, right? And one particular form of that is yoga. I'm personally a big fan of that, obviously, because I started there. But what it also does, and outside of the fact that yoga is about way more than just some pretzel body positions, but what it does is it helps you really actively manage your parasympathetic nervous system. Like when you think about this position, right, that position is damn uncomfortable after a while. You start shaking or something, right? But what you're doing is you're breathing through it, right? And while you're there and you're shaking, which already is triggering stress and triggering the amygdala, but you're breathing through it. Right? So you also tell your parasympathetic nervous system, it's okay, I can do this. Right? Which then releases dopamine, which ultimately helps you increase your neuroplasticity as well and gives you motivation. So it's a part of the habit formation. So very helpful tool here as well. Then, of course, emotions. I talk a lot about psychological safety in safe spaces. Right? Like right now, for example, I'm doing an entrepreneurship program with Siemens, and the key focus that we have there is psychological safety for the participants, because they have all kinds of cool innovation methods, no problem. But what's missing is the actual psychological safety for people to innovate. And that means you get to be you fully, all those interfaces, and bring all of them to the table. Where you have an idea, for example, that you're discussing with your team, and then say, it doesn't feel right in my body. And where it's okay to say that. Well, psychological safety simply means it's okay for you to be fully you. And Google did research around that in high-performing teams, and they found that's the number one indicator for a high-performing team, psychological safety. Everybody can be themselves. And then there are safe spaces, really creating for yourself some place where you can go and just be you, right? Where it's just, nobody's going to come at you. Psychological safety, people can still challenge you, but it feels comfortable because you can be yourself around it. In a safe space, nobody's there to challenge you, right? So create those moments for yourself where you just be just you. Right? For me, I used to travel a lot. And when I came into a hotel room, I'm like, you're my little safe castle now, right? And it can be a hotel room. It doesn't matter where it is, right? But I create those moments where you can just be you and nobody wants anything from you, right? Even if it's 5 minutes, close the door. And we kind of came up this morning with Sonia's talk as well about empathy, right? To really understand, first of all, have empathy with yourself. Right? I mean, you're doing your best. Everything and everybody who's alive is doing their very best. It might not look like it. And you look sometimes when you turn on the news and you see incredible stupidity that occurs in some places in the world at times. And you're like, really, people? Really? You know what I mean? But really, that's where they're at. Right? Everybody's doing their best. So be kind to yourself, be kind to everybody else. Everybody's doing their best. And you never know what's going on for someone else. So what you can do for yourself really to increase that, and it came up this morning, was gratitude. Gratitude is one of the most powerful tools you have to regulate yourself. I've actually done research that if you think about something that you're grateful for, your heart rate variability goes into coherence. And my dad, when he went into retirement, he exited the hospital under somewhat stupid circumstances, some bureaucratic shit, and he had a really hard time being grateful for his 30 years of work. And sure enough, he got heart rhythm issues shortly after, and he had some surgery and all that. But once I taught him this trick, he never had heart rhythm issues again. Simply by being grateful. And actually being grateful releases serotonin, releases all these different things. And if you have a hard time finding something, it can be silly. It can be the fact that I have a nose, the fact that I can take a breath, and really the fact that you're alive. Right? 3.5 billion years of trial and error and suffering and death and all kinds of things happen so you can be here right now. Right? The probability of being in a human system and actually experiencing this is ridiculously tiny. Right? So to just be alive, to wake up in the morning and say like, wow, I'm alive another day. Wow, what am I going to do today? What am I create with this? Right? To really feel that's one of the most powerful elements. And if you don't think you have time for it, think about you brushing your teeth for 2 minutes. Right? So those 2 minutes, think of things that you're grateful for. Easy. And you have an emotional set point for the day. And if things rattle you later on during the day, if there's stressful situations, you had your 2 minutes of gratitude in the morning. You're like, hey man, I'm feeling good today. So bake that into your morning ritual somehow. Because you're also creating ripples, right? Like how you feel impacts everybody. And you might have had the situation where you've had a really good meeting and someone comes in and is all pissy and suddenly the whole mood is ruined. Right? Because we feel each other, right? To the point where literally there's so-called mirror neurons and limbic resonance, right? You'll pick up on the mood around you. And at the moment, the whole herd is anxious. Right? We have an incredibly anxious herd around us. There's already stress in the air. So even if you're doing great, you're still picking up a bit of what's going on around you. Right? And so think about what you're creating, what ripples are you making, right? With how you're showing up emotionally. Right? Back in the day, it used to be okay to have a choleric boss who just yell at everybody. Right? That's not okay. It's never been okay, and it's definitely not okay anymore. Right? Because they are creating these ripples in a very impactful, negative way. So be aware of that. Right? And emotions are triggered by thoughts. Right? If I think, yay, everything is great, I feel better. If I think everything is shit, I don't feel so good. When people talk a lot about mindfulness, I actually think mind emptiness would probably be a better word for it, because it's not about having more thoughts in your head. Right? I've rarely ever talked to people that are like, oh, I have not enough thought in my head. Right? It's usually like, I have too many thoughts in my head. Right? It's usually way too much, because the average human thinks between 12 and 60,000 thoughts a day. It's really hard to measure, and depending on the research you read at, because how do you measure if someone had a thought or not? Right? But roughly 12 to 60,000 thoughts. What we do know is the majority of them are repetitive and self-deprecating. Right? The majority of thoughts we have every day are like, oh, I wish I'd done this better. I could have said that. I should have done that. I should have done that, right? Or this could happen when they worry about things, right? Because thought creates time. Right? If I'm not thinking, I'm just here. Right? If I want to think about the future or the past, that's when I can worry. And if you're like me and you have a bit of a hard time, one trick that a shaman taught me years ago, which I really liked, was while you're actually doing it, say out loud in your head, I'm the one inhaling, I'm the one exhaling. Right? So I learned this originally in meditation, and sit down and go, I'm the one inhaling, I'm the one exhaling. I'm the one inhaling, I'm the one exhaling. And the thing is, you can't think anything else at the same time. because your mental body is a linear processor, right? It can only think one thing at a time. So if you're thinking this, you're not thinking everything else. Right? So it's a really helpful tool. And I was very excited when I learned it first. I came back to the shaman. I said, yay, my meditation gets so much better. I'm doing this, doing my meditation now. I'm not thinking so much anymore. And she said, no, do it all the time. I said, what do you mean? She said, I do it all the time. So I started doing it, just sitting in meetings. And I'm like, I'm the one inhaling, I'm the one exhaling, right? In a boardroom of all these executives having important conversations. But I actually paid more attention. Right? I wasn't thinking about what they just said or what I want to go say next or what should be said or any of those things. I was simply going under one inhaling, under one exhaling, and I was listening. And I saw so much more about the little subtle physical signals, the body language. Right? I could pay so much more attention because I wasn't thinking about what to say next. So I invite you to think as little as possible. And if you think something that's actually helpful, like a positive affirmation for yourself. And you can also use replacement thoughts as another tool, right? If you have a lot of recurring negative thoughts that come up all the time, write a list of them and then write right next to them another thought that's also true, or more true maybe, that you can use instead. And for example, if you think, oh, 2020 sucked, that doesn't make you feel particularly good to think that thought, right? I can also say, okay, cool, that's kind of true. And there's a lot of really beautiful new things that started happening in 2020. That's also true. And if I think that makes me much more positive and resilient about the future, right? Because if I think, 2020 is like, 2021 is going to be horrible. Who wants to live like that? Right? That's not very inspiring. Right? So find thoughts that actually work for you and that are also true. Right? It's not about making it nice. Right? It's not about pretending and magical thinking bullshit. Right? This is real stuff. It's like, this is real. What's also real? Right? And if you're objective not there's all kinds of perspectives on everything to be found. And of course, your relationships is another key thing, right? And the first one is really with yourself. Right? Every time you say something and you do it, you know you're cool. Every time you say something and you don't do it, you know inside that you're out of integrity with yourself. That's super stressful. And if you then have to even catch up with where you have done things, even more stressful. Right? So be in good relationship with yourself to begin with. And then of course with your community, right? With all the people around you. In yoga, we talk about these 7 key relationships of family, your partner, romantic relationships, your friends, your community at large, your work environment, the people, neighbors, etc. Your relationship with yourself, with nature, and with teachers, like mentors, gurus, psychologists, coaches, whatever helps you. Right? Like somebody is there to just support you. And what you want to also do is create yourself a community that supports you in being you. Right? And they might not get what you do. Right? Like for years, my dad had no understanding. He's always like, dude, I don't know what to tell my friends when they're trying to figure out what you do. Right? Because as an innovator, it's sometimes difficult. So, but you can still be kind and create boundaries and make those relationships support you. Right? So really think about what is a community around you that could support you in being you. And then express yourself. Right? That's the other thing. It's like journal, get it out. Right? I mean, everybody that I know that really works on high performance stuff, yeah, all journal, because it helps to get stuff out of your head. But if you're going shopping and you're trying to keep 20 things in your head, you don't do that. You write it down. You write a list, right? So you can look at it. It's the same thing when you're stressed about something. Write it down, because once you write it down, it's not going to do this rotating thing in your head anymore. And you can actually look at it objectively and go like, whoa, this is how I felt. Interesting. You can look at it as something outside of yourself and interact with it, engage with it. So get it out, sing it, dance it, draw it, find whatever tool works for you, but get it out regularly. Right? And imagining, right? We've talked already a bit about imagining before, but it's like the vision, what we imagine the future to be. Right? If imagining it to be horrible, it doesn't feel so good. Right? Even the word worry in English comes from German würgen, which means to choke. Right? So if I'm worrying, I'm choking myself, which means not much oxygen goes into the brain, not much good thinking. Right? Positive visualization, why not? That's motivating. Right? If I think about the world we could all live in, that makes me want to get up in the morning and do something about it. And finally, this calling, right, to really remember what's really important, right? Like not to sweat the petty shit. Right? There's so much crap you could get excited about. Yesterday, I talked to a friend of mine who was very concerned with the political clown show that's going on in our country right now. And I said, yeah, that's completely ridiculous and it's horrible. And do you want to just spend your day paying attention to that right now? Or do you want to continue to watch the news that are not really helpful? Or do you want to spend your day thinking about all the things that you can do to create a world where that's actually relevant? Right? So what are you paying attention to? What's really important? And first and foremost, you are important. your experience, your moments, your sense, everything you're experiencing right now, your emotions, that's the most important thing. So pay attention to that and really think about who you want to be one day when you're dead. Because you're going to die, right? With all the life extension stuff, in all likelihood, you're going to die. And it's actually a good thing, because if you live forever, we wouldn't appreciate the moments we have here. Right? And one day your life's going to be over, and there's going to be so many moments that you lived. There's going to be a sum total of all the quality of those moments. And so if you focus on the moment with who you want to be when you're dead one day, and you act from there, you know that by the time you die one day, you can look back and say, my moments were useful. I used my moments. I did something with them. So who are you practicing to be every day? Right? What are the different things you're doing regularly to be yourself? Right? And I actually just recently wrote an article on morning rituals. If you go to medium.com/Phil, you'll find it. It's really about how do we start our day, right? We talked about this different operating system, and most people kind of get up and they just run and do and start thinking or running after their commitments, but they're not bringing their whole intelligence to bear, right? They're not activating all of it. So at least spend like 2 or 3 minutes, little sideways stretch. Oh, hello, body. Good morning. I'm in my body now. Right? Spend a moment to pay attention to it so you can bring that to bear during the day. Right? Set your emotional set point for the day to say, how do I want to feel today? I want to feel grateful and happy. Right? Take a moment to still your thoughts, to remind yourself that I am the one in charge of my thoughts, not my thoughts are in charge of me. Right? And look at your commitments for the day. Look at who you create value for that day. And express yourself a little bit, sing, dance, write a journal, whatever, vision a moment, and just remind yourself that you're here to create every day. So with all that in mind, I want to leave you with Aldous Huxley's beautiful quote, and he's one of my favorite authors. If I could take one book to a deserted island, it would be his book, Island. But he says, it's dark because you're trying too hard. Lightly, child, lightly. Learn to do everything lightly. Yes, feel deeply, feel lightly, even though you are feeling deeply. Another version of it is row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. So with that in mind, go rock 2021, and please, 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 please be super kind to yourself. Self-care is not selfish. Self-care is actually the one thing you need to do before you can take care of everybody else. So thank you so much for spending some time with me today. And I guess we have a few minutes for questions. I did go a little longer, pardon me, Kate, but we do have a few moments for questions.
Yes, we do. Thank you so much. That was it's morning here for me, so it was a great way to start my day. And I'm definitely going to take some of those morning rituals. Thank you for those. Does anyone have any questions? I don't see anything in the chat right now. So feel free to come on mic or just raise your hand. Anyone? There we go. Now I can see everybody. Anyone need some additional tips or have any questions about how our brain works? I think you did a wonderful job, Philip, of really explaining how our brain responds. Sometimes I can forget,
we all do. I mean, it's kind of astounding to me when you start learning these things. We know a lot. I mean, as I said, I use this yoga mat, but we have thousands of years of empirical science, and now we have the neuroscience behind it. Right? Like I just had a beautiful talk the other day. We talk about the neurology of habit formation. Right? That when we encounter something new or when we do something new, it's stressful at first. Right? And then adrenaline, epinephrine is released. Right? And that's actually a good thing because it gets us to pay attention. Right? And then if we in that moment say, good job, keep going, yeah. Right? And we get that dopamine that usually is abused by all those little social media notifications, but we get that dopamine thing. What that now does is actually triggers acetylcholine to now make new markers around these new pathways that you're trying out. Right? And then when you celebrate and rest, and especially when you rest, you get serotonin, which now goes back to those markers and says, hey, there was something here, we should build a path. Right? And they actually build this new path. Right? So if you want to change your brain, right, you want to get that adrenaline kick, and then while you're in it, while you're in the process, while you're working out, and you're like, ouch, this hurts right now. Ouch, just tell yourself, I'm doing it. Yeah, I'm doing it. Right? And in that moment, that actually enforces the learning. Right? And then you get habituated. Right? And there's a beautiful image in yoga about the bird, right, where your vision, your head is always looking to the horizon, like what's the next thing you can see? And then you have your two wings, and that's your ability to adopt new good habits and let go of habits that don't serve you any longer. And then there's your tail, which is the fact that we're habitual creatures in the first place. Right? Like 99% of what we do is habit. Right? But you can change these habits slightly. right? And you can move these habits a little bit. And by doing that, you're shifting who you be all the time by default. And I had a wonderful moment last fall where I was getting up in the morning and I'm like, part of me was starting to tell me the story of why I shouldn't work out this morning, right? I'm like, oh, today you can take a day off. It's no. And it was telling me all these stories, right? And while it was telling me the stories, my body just went and got my yoga mat and put my yoga mat on the floor and started doing yoga. I was like, yeah, fuck you, buddy. Right? And it was like that habituated thing, right? It was like, you might have heard about the book Thinking Fast and Slow, the kind of like the system 1, system 2, right? Or system 1, our body and emotion. That's actually where we make 99% of our decisions, right? It's a habituated system. And then we have, you can think of it sort of like the elephant, and then you have the rational and the relational system above it as sort of the rider of the elephant, right? And when that guy's awake, he's like, hey, go to the left elephant or go to the right elephant, right? But sometimes that elephant just goes over there because it wants to, right? I remember like a couple of years ago, I was, quitting smoking, but I was on my way to the airport and I realized I had no tobacco with me, right? I'm like, okay, this is the time, today is the day, quit smoking. Right? But then my elephant like literally found its way in the store to the first store that I could find to go buy tobacco, right? And it didn't have it. So I'm like, oh, okay, cool. This is the day you quit smoking, right? But my body just started walking to the next store to see if they have some, right? And I was literally like laughing at myself. I'm like, really, Philip? How fucking stupid are you? Really? This is your chance. Stop now, right? But it's that conversation between the elephant and the rider. And this explains why a lot of people do stupid shit. You know what I mean? And why there's some behaviors we really say, why do you keep doing this? It's not good for you, right? And we're addicted not just to drugs and things, we're addicted to behaviors and to neurochemistry even, right? If you're used to being depressed, if you're used to being angry, if you're used to being that, our brain is used to that neurochemistry and will recreate that neurochemistry for us. Right? And if you've been in relationships where there's always fighting, for example, you get into this habit of fighting all the time. And then actually, if you're not fighting, something doesn't feel right because we should be fighting. This is how we relate to each other, right? Or in offices, even like when people in the job, if you're not stressed, we're not doing good work, right? It's like, really? Why not? Right? I mean, Hans, I remember a beautiful moment with Hans a few years ago at an entrepreneurs conference, and I came up to him and someone was there with him and he said, I think it's so awesome that you're organizing this whole conference and you don't seem stressed and worried and freaked out at all. And he just looked at her and he said, would it help you if I was? One of my favorite little Hans Baumeckers moments. But.
Well, we do have some questions coming in.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
And I think you might have just touched on this actually, but Niall, do you want to come on mic and ask your question?
Hi, yeah, felt really interesting talk. I was really struck by your bit about talking about negative ripples. I've got a colleague that I line manage who is negative, I would say 80% of the time, and it's really difficult for my mental health to deal with that. Any helpful tips on how I can sort of shut down those conversations?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I think the first thing is for yourself to embrace the possibility that he could be different. Right? I think this is one of those interesting things. I had a talk with a project manager one time, and he said, I have these two people on my team, they almost never see eye to eye, right? There's one introvert, the other's an extrovert, they can't deal with each other at all. And I said, what can I do? And I said, start thinking about it differently. So like giving them, imagine how they were hanging out. And the next day we're sitting together, I come down to lunch and they're actually sitting together talking, and he's just looking at me like, what the hell happened? Right? And so for you to actually embrace, hey, he's also doing his best. Right? He's doing his best wherever he's at right now, but he also has the possibility to change. He could change tomorrow. And then actually the second step is to be clear about when your boundaries are violated. Right? You can't teach people to be different. They are going to be who they are, but you can teach them how to interact with you and what's okay and what's not okay with you. Right? And when he comes into a room and pisses you off or comes and unloads negative crap, you can say, hey, listen, I was just sitting here, I was super productive. And then you came in and you started telling me this story with a lot of what I perceive as negative experience on it. And it really ruined my productive vibe that I had here. Would you mind not sharing these kind of things with me? And simply pointing out the behavior. Oftentimes people don't even notice. They're just in their own little world. They do their thing. This is just how they are. Right? I was like, this is how they are. It's like, that's not how they are. Right? That's what they've learned to be. And they can learn to be different. And they can learn to be different with you. Right? So really setting your boundaries and being clear about what's okay with you and what's not okay with you. What's acceptable behavior and what's not. And that's all you can do. And you can literally point out to him what the consequences of his behavior are. Because oftentimes people are not aware. They just think it's normal. It's just like, oh, sorry. Right? But to actually notice, hey, did you notice how the team around you really, how they changed when you walked in? Did Do you see that? To teach him, be some reflection for him.
No, that's really good. Thank you for that. I shall try that out. That's really good. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, you also had a question. Would you like to come on mic and ask yours, or I can as well? No? Okay, no mic access. Great. Sarah asked she said, thank you for this great presentation. How such posture can be achieved in organizations that are owned by public shareholders or venture funds with non-realistic growth expectations? Do you see interesting initiatives to match the need for such a posture change and the financial constraints?
I mean, one of the best things that I think that happened in 2021 was we became human with each other. Right, we suddenly saw each other. There's even research that shows if you have pictures of your family in the cubicle, you're actually less likely to cheat the company. But suddenly we saw each other as humans. Like we saw each other in our living rooms with our children around us, and became more human with each other. So I think it's happening anyway. I think the other thing that people have realized is that 2020 stress and mental health suddenly became a topic because people realize that it's not working when people are stressed out and completely freaked out. So on a very basic level, there's a lot of research that actually shows that there's a bottom line effect of taking care of mental health. Right? I mean, if you think about on the HR side, it's all the sick days that you're saving and all the presenteeism bullshit that you're saving yourself. Right? And on the other side, it's actually the better performance. Right? Like people who are actually connected to themselves and bring their full intelligence, they do much more. Right? I mean, the reason I mentioned earlier this entrepreneurship program at Siemens that we're doing there, they actually specifically came up to us and said, we have these great business model canvas, we have all the tools, we have lean, design thinking, blah, 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 but we don't have people who can use this. Right? And if you have a whole bunch of people sitting around in a room, dehydrated, stressed out, maybe afraid of their job even, you might as well take your Post-it notes and light them on fire. Your whole innovation thing is bullshit and theater. Right? People are not going to really bring themselves and bring their genius there. Right? So to create that, and as I said, Google's research alone on psychological safety as the #1 indicator for high-performing teams is already a pretty good one. But more and more companies are realizing how important it really is, right? Down to the, as I said, massively detrimental effects that stress can have. Right? I mean, I mentioned these different change makers, artists, entrepreneurs, etc. If you look at the suicide stats, and depression stats, and substance abuse stats in those professional groups, they're pretty damn high compared to everybody else. Right? So artists have the highest suicide rates. We're just starting to talk about entrepreneurs killing themselves. And as an entrepreneur, it's not much different. Right? That isolation, to feel that isolation inside of a large company all the time, you're always, again, getting that no all the time. It takes a huge toll on your health. And I've seen it in the last few years, many innovators, and even Sonia talked about it this morning. She said, I was an executive, I had this dream position, I was doing all the right things, and I was miserable and stressed all the time, right? And it doesn't work. Right? And I've seen a lot of people and colleagues in innovation in the last years who were in organizations who left because they simply couldn't handle running against the wall all the time. Right? And so I think the good news is it is changing. People are becoming aware of humans. And people are becoming aware that if you want to have customer focus, that starts with employee focus. Until you actually take care of your people, all of that design thinking thing is bullshit, honestly. And I've seen it, I've talked to people who have done research around when design thinking is working and when it's not working. And it's working when you have people that can be themselves, can be full humans, can bring themselves to work. Then it works. And if you have design thinking where people can't even look each other in the eye, forget empathy. You know what I mean? It doesn't, and I've met design thinking coaches who can't look you in the eye because they don't feel comfortable. All the methods, and it's super awesome. They're really beautiful, sweet people too. Right? But that whole empathy thing is still a little tricky.
Yeah. Yeah, I also just, there was a report, Gallup just did a survey, the engaged employees, which are already less than most of your employees.
40%.
And are engaged. And they did a survey of those engaged employees, about 160 million responses worldwide, and found that even out of those, they weren't engaged, but not thriving in their lives. And now have linked that whole person thriving to their ability to come to work and related it to absenteeism. And because if you're engaged, but not thriving, you have a higher rate of worry, like you were just talking about, higher rate of stress, higher rate of burnout, which impacts everything in your team that you've heard for engaged workers, right?
Exactly.
So,
No, this is the ripple. I mean, as I said, most organizations are not human-friendly environments. You know, I mean, I think this is really the one chance we have right now, especially in this transition. Well, there's an amazing opportunity to say, hey guys, we get to take care of our humans, right? Because that's the number one asset as a company. And if they're not functioning, if your humans aren't functioning, then your company is bullshit. You know, I mean, and sooner or later, I mean, it might only be alive because it's propped up by enough history and, you know, balance sheet assets, you know what I mean? But sooner or later, it's going to go away. Because you're going to lose your top talent, right? You're going to stress out your innovators who are going to leave, right? And everybody around them is going to be like, this is not fun to work here, right? And so you're losing your best talent too.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you for such a wonderful talk. So we are at the top of the hour. Where can they find more from you, Philip?
You can find more from me if you go to Lumen, luman.io, or Philip Horvath, philiphorvath.com. So if you just look for my name, Google, unfortunately, there's not many people with that name, that pretty face. So you should be able to find me on Google. I was always told I had a face for radio. So, you know, anyway. So anyway, you can find me online,
well, thank you so much.
LinkedIn, all those good things. And always happy to connect with innovators because you guys are my heroes. I mean, you're actually driving change in organizations out there, and it's not easy. So again, be kind to yourself, and thank you for doing such an important job.
Thank you. Thank you, Philip. And thank you to all of you for joining, and we look forward to seeing you in the next session. Have a wonderful day.